Planes everywhere. We got the XL F15 XXL F15 from Skymaster. We've got a brand new Rebel Classic in the background. And we also have the SU30 from Skymaster that just arrived. So lots in the queue, guys. Welcome to video 5 in the build series of the Skymaster F15 XXL aircraft. Let's dive back in. All right, so last video we had glued down our main plate. We got our tanks installed, turbines are installed, pipes are installed, tail surfaces are done. Lots completed in the last video. Tanks are done as well too, and our data relay modules are installed. So we are making some wicked progress. This morning, while I was working on the trailer, Artemis, I took the tray out on the front here, we painted it. Nez is currently using it as a licking board, but so front tray's painted. We have to make some holes and stuff in there, but at least that painting portion's done. Now I think the next thing to hop to is going to be the wings. Now the reason for the wings, the wings are actually sort of simple in the grand scheme of things because our flap surface is on the wing, but our actuation arm is on the fuselage side, which is cool. Now we haven't done our linkages up yet. If you go back a couple videos ago, we put the servo in, we put the clevis on our servo, but we haven't done our linkages up yet. We can do that later on. I'd like to do that once the electronics get installed because we want to have that servo centered with the wing on, so that's going to be a later thing. But our aileron surface is in the wing, so we need to get our line, which is actually very simple because it's just one line. Plus there'll be probably some light wires coming out, so it's going to be a very simple wing connection. But that's going to be coming through the big opening right there. So quite simple on the wings, I think. So let's pull the wings out and get started on those guys. We're gonna have to make a little bit of room here because we've got the nose section sitting here. So probably gonna put the nose over there, clean this bench off. The wings are big, so we're only gonna have one up on it at a time. So let's get everything cleaned up. All right, so first time really taking a deep look at the way the aileron linkage is set up. So it's very unique. So we've got our aileron, obviously the surface. There is looks like there's a piece mounted in the surface, and it's kind of like a universal joint. And then when this shaft that comes this direction moves towards the servo or away from the servo, that makes the surface move up and down. Now the way this servo is going to mount is the typical Skymaster mounts. So it's going to sit like that. This ball joint gets screwed into the end of our metal or steel rod that comes through, and then it'll attach to the servo arm like that. So let's pull this aileron surface out so we can take a look. I'm assuming it's going to come out. We might have to take the flap out actually. So flap wire is at the root. Okay, so flap is off. And then now let's see about this aileron coming out. There we go, easy peasy. So yeah, that is the setup here. Very beefy, pretty stinking cool. So essentially this moves, so it's kind of at looks like about a 45-degree angle. So the pivot arm is at a 45-degree angle. So when this moves away, it's going to turn like this. And when it moves towards, like that. So pretty slick system. So I see that there is a set screw right there. So we'll pull that set screw out, make sure we Loctite it, and then obviously we'll clean this up and lubricate it a little bit. The actual material that it moves through, there's a carbon rib right here, but there's a piece of G10 right there. So it's that G10 that makes it move in and out. So pretty darn cool system. First time I've ever seen anything like that. Very, very unique. So we got the wing back together and we were kind of getting things lined up here. First issue that I noticed is the rods that Skymaster has supplied is a 440 thread, and these ball joints are 3mm threads. So if you screw these in, they seem like they're fitting, but then if you tighten them down a little bit, they just strip out. So be aware of that if you're building one of these kits. Double check that, because it seems like those are correct, but they're not. So I took a 3mm screw here, screwed that in, and everything's good. So what I'll do is I'm going to take a piece of 3mm rod, and we're going to sheet it with carbon fiber, and we're going to make our own control rod for this setup. Now the only downside to doing that is then we need to figure out our other end, because we can't use the Sullivan Golden Clevis. I think I've got some metric versions of these in stock as well too, so but I will show you guys the steps or the final result. Okay, so we got our linkage done up here, so pretty much mirrored the same arm as before using 3mm rod. So I've used Loctite into the ball on this end. We've got the surface itself centered right now on the wing, and then with the ball sitting right over top of the output shaft, we are almost in the exact center of the servo. The servo's got a little bit of movement side to side, but this gives us our dimensions for our carbon rod. So I'm going to leave that carbon rod just a little bit shy of the end, so we've got the ability to adjust the clevis side, but that is our linkage setup that we're going to be using. All right, so let's review spacing here. So ideally you want this ball joint and everything to work on a straight line like that. So with the way this servo positioning and everything is set, the servo naturally wants to sit back a little bit further. So I'm going to over exaggerate this for view, but if we're on the end of that ball, or the ball's on the end of the arm, and we're going to the servo in its stock position, we're kind of like that, which is no good obviously for a clevis. You don't want side to side. With the Aileron servo, there's not enough room, well there sort of is if we only wanted to use one screw, to slide that Aileron servo towards the rear part of the wing. The other option you have here is there's a little bit of gap or spacing between the two mounts, so you can take that servo and move it on an angle like that, so it becomes sort of in a straight line. The downside to that is when you go to down aileron movement, we get full movement because that arm is moving this way. When we go to full up, you got to remember the wing's upside down. When we go to full up aileron movement, this ball joint is bottoming out on the arm. So if our servo is sitting like that, we actually don't get full movement because the arm only goes this far. So basically what I've done here as a solution is put a longer 3mm screw on here, put 3 nuts. The remainder here is exactly the same as the remainder or the screw-in portion of the previous fastener. That's important because it bottoms out in this metal arm here, the actuating arm. So I'm going to get this screwed in place. That's hopefully going to bring this end out enough that we can get a nice straight line here with the servo. So I'll get this installed, we'll come back and take a look. All right, so I had to switch things around a little bit because of the mode of putting this stuff together. So our arm was installed on this end, clevis installed on the arm loosely, and servo came out, blue arm went on the servo and got centered. Now the servo arm, the stock servo arm, is too long in its stock format, so I had to go in to the next hole in, which is exactly 20mm. So now that we have those pieces on, I'm just getting the clevis installed. Now these clevises are the Carf clevises, just extra metric 3mm clevises. And what I'll do is I'm going to I've got a piece of yellow fuel tubing. So that piece of yellow fuel tubing is sitting right here, and once it's all connected, we'll just slide that fuel tubing up. All right, so we've got our arm connected, we've got our servo plugged into the central box, and things look great. So we're basically perfectly centered on that surface. Wow, travel-wise here, actually Sticks max straight out, so that's amazing. That servo arm at 20 mils is pretty much as close as you can get to the top surface of the wing. You might be able to sneak a couple more millimeters out, but really 20 mils is going to be the longest that you can go. And then as far as our servo settings go here, just so you can see, so aileron surface, we're dealing with number 1 right now is 100 and 100. And then let's see what our dual rates are, if anything. Oh yeah, dual rates 100 and 100, so. Awesome. So yeah, at 100% travel on the servo, we're getting our full travel on the surface. Wicked. And here's a closer up shot inside the servo. So perfection. I love these 599 servos, they're awesome. And our surface is nice and tight. So the wing is basically mechanics, that's it. Just the aileron to do in here. Quite a bit of spacing, figuring out and everything. Now I didn't duplicate anything. I didn't duplicate the arms or the carbon or anything like that because I figure on the other wing it may be spaced a little bit different. So we're gonna do each wing independently. We have to do our lead up here and get our servo plugged into our servo wire. And then we've got the excess just coming out of the root of the wing. All right, so we're ready to put our cover plates on here. So I've put the plates on, checked the fit. Fit is good. Drilled a 1/16 hole in all 4. Now it's very important when you're dealing with the Skymaster small screws like this that you don't use CA on the screws. The screws are quite delicate, and if you use CA, what happens is the screws will snap. Even if you pre-drill the hole, put CA in there, let it cure, it stiffens things up too much and the screw head just pops off. So a little tidbit of info for you. And then what I do here is I take my countersink bit, this guy right there, and we just go through and add a little angle on all of the screw holes, just like that. That just helps obviously the screws to sit flush. All right, so before we put those covers on, we're gonna vacuum out our dust. And now we'll get these guys put on. Now, one thing I've noticed with Skymaster over the years is when I used to build some of their kits many years ago, the kits would never come with plates that actually lined up properly. So you'd have like a little plate like this and the things would just be completely random or nothing at all as far as matching rivet lines. So that's one huge thing that Skymaster has worked on. Not that it's a big thing, but those little details kind of matter, and they matter to, well, they matter to me, but they are important. So when we're making sure we don't over tighten these guys. Now the kit comes with a couple sizes of screws. I'm just making the assumption that the very small screws are for this little hatch. So these screws are about 5 millimeters long maybe. And then you've got the normal size ones that come in the kits. Those guys right there. And they're probably about 10 millimeters long. Now if you do have a tight hole like this, or you've put some CA in there, or if you're going into like carbon fiber or G10, what I'll do is I will rotate the screwdriver back and forth, and that I find helps to get the screw head in without having the head snap off. So if they're going into wood, they're pretty good. The wood here is very, very thick, so that's why we're getting a little bit of resistance. The 1/16 hole is actually a little bit oversized, I would think, but it helps to do the 1/16 hole because then you have less resistance on the screw. And there we go. So the mechanics of the left wing are complete. Now we'll do the exact same thing on the right wing. And once those wings are done, then we'll do the root of the wing and the connection. All right, so with the wing getting put all together, it's time to work on our root of our wing here. So we've got one of our lights coming like this. We've taken the extensions off. The other light goes to the tip, comes like that. And then what I did is I ran our servo line along the same lines as the light wires. So we'll get these all wrapped up in snakeskin as well too. But these 7 leads are going to go to an Ashlock connector. Now, this is a new thing for us here at the lighter side of RC. So Joe at RC Custom 3D Printing, who does most of our 3D printing stuff, he came up with this design. This has been a long time in the making. Lots of redesigns and stuff. Thank you, Joe, for really knocking these things out of the park. So these are the Ashlock holders. So we are probably going to have these on our website soon. I just kind of ordered a few here to begin with to kind of 100% try them out, make sure I'm happy with them. And so far, even just fitting this stuff in there roughly, it makes a lot of sense. So I'll show you guys the details of this little piece. Now, it looks like a silly little piece, but there's a lot of thought put into this. All right, so a couple things with this. Number one, it can be glued in place. So it's got little receiver pieces there, or screwed in place. It's got one or a couple layers over top of the screw hole right there, which is awesome. The other nice thing about it is the wires don't need to be fed through the connector. There is a cutout there. So you could do your Ashlock connector and get all the wires done and everything, and then get this piece installed in the receptacle like that. So great little piece. And then of course your other side, your male side, I guess, goes in like that. So you could glue these in place. They're kind of a nice snug fit as well. I don't know if I'm going to glue it or not. We'll see. I might put 1 drop of CA on there, but it's a beautiful fit. And then of course you've got access to your little pin or your little holder push right there as well too. So great unit. Now how we're going to get these mounted in the fuselage is they are going to be mounted to some wood blocks like this. So what that looks like is these wood blocks are going to get glued to the back side of the fuselage like that. And then ultimately this connector is going to sit just like that. So nice, easy, nice and supported. This is a great scenario for this because you've got good access. You've got this wide open area where you really don't have anywhere to mount the Ashlock connector to. So having this fit like that is just, I think, a really simple, great option. So my little pencil marks there are just the center marks of the connector that I decided on. And that's, I think, 70 millimeters away from the leading edge of the carbon wing tube. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get these guys spot glued in place with a little bit of CA. So just holding it together like this, get that stuck on the back side. Then we'll do the other side of the vertical wood piece. Once that's spot glued in place, then we'll come back and we'll use a little bit of aero epoxy to hold it nice and strong. And then we'll paint those probably gray to blend in a little bit better. All right, so we've got our wing connector hooked up here. I like to keep the same pattern for wiring. So in a case like this where we're using a 9-pin connector, I always put there's an arrow on these connectors that helps everything line up. So right above my thumbnail there's an arrow. So that's always signal for me. So it's always signal positive, negative. Then if I'm using lights in this case or like landing gear, I skip the signal and then still keep my positive, negative, skip the signal, keep my positive, negative. Just one of those little picky things that I like to do. So the wing side is complete. And now because of those Ashlock connector holders that we have, I can get this whole system here done up and then we can install it afterwards. So I did get our little holders all painted. So I've measured our wire out. So our wire path is going to come like this, along this former, down, and then to the very front here. So with that stuff done, we can get this side of the connector done up to match the wing side. And then we can get this section installed. All right, so our harness is all done up here. Pretty straightforward, obviously covered in snakeskin. The snakeskin is there for the exposed part that's not underneath the tray. This section of wire here is for underneath the tray. And we're gonna mark off on this end that this is our aileron left, just so we know where to clamp those wire ends on once we're ready for them. So now we can get this installed in the aircraft. So I'll share this with you guys because this is the first time I've done it as well. So we'll just pop this through there. I haven't played with these connectors yet with wires attached to them, so. Oh, nice. I was kind of worried the snakeskin wouldn't fit in there, but that is perfect, way easier than I thought. So give that a spin. So the heat shrink, it gets a little bit tight, but that's no problem. Wow. Awesome. So I'm not going to glue those guys in. I'm just going to leave them like that. And yeah, that's wicked. And then of course our wing side, if our wing was getting connected, just plugs in. Very nice. All right, so I want to get the wing installed primarily so we can see where our flap neutral is. So I want to get this flap installed, and then that will let me see where this neutral needs to be on this wing. So that's the point of this, and obviously just checking the fit. So very nice and simple on this wing install. This is awesome, absolutely wicked. So we've got the quick release system from SkyMaster. Our Ashlock, of course, just plugs in like this. Very nice. Lots of room in there for that connector to go in. And then our wing is just going to slide on. So just being gentle with this. I tell you guys, I can't remember which video it was, but the fly right stand that we got here has been an absolute game changer for this aircraft. It's so nice to be able to wheel it around the shop and move it around, and just makes dealing with it so much easier because it's such a huge aircraft. I'm just moving you guys back so we can get a little bit different angle on this thing. So I'm just being gentle with it because we haven't really put this together yet. And you have a lot of things going on here with the flap and the wing and all that stuff. So nice. Awesome. There she is. That is phenomenal. So flap neutral. Yes, that little tab is perfect for neutral. So if we take this flap and tuck it up to the little tab in the slot that's on the flap's just a little bit higher than the aileron. So, but that at least gives us a stop there, which is good. And then we'll be able to see our neutral point here on our arm. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take our flap arm, our actuation arm, get that installed on the flap just temporarily, just so we can see if this is perfectly straight up and down or what kind of angle it's at. Okay, so our flat spot's to the back, which means we're going to use that one. There is a specific side for this. There we go. So now if I operate this, you can see the flap doing its thing. Perfect. And then I'm going to go around the other side and just get a visual on that guy. So yes, our flap is neutral right now when we're straight up and down. So when I look from this side right here, there we go. So when I look from this side right here, you can see the silver arm, which is the flap arm. That is straight up and down, which is perfect. So now I know where to set that arm up to have the flaps at neutral. or off. All right, so our right wing is now complete, which is awesome. And we are ready to do our flap servos. So we've taken a look at the flap servos in the previous clip. And what we need to do is we need to be able to power up those flap servos and get them set to neutral. So we've got our flap servo leads here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all of the leads that are coming from the back of the plane right at the nose here. And what that'll allow us to do is basically go anywhere in this fuselage section, and we can get our ends installed as well. So I'll do up these two guys so they're done, and that'll allow us to plug these into the receiver. Okay, so we've got our flap servos, ends put on, plugged into the central box, powered on. And if I use our flap switch on the radio, you might be able to hear flaps are doing their thing. So now with those guys powered up, we can put our silver ends on the actuation arm. What I'll do first is I'll pull these guys out, add a little bit of light machine oil or lubricant on these guys because they rotate inside of a brass piece. It's pretty smooth, but we want it to be obviously as less restrictive as possible. And then we'll put our silver pieces on and get our linkage set up. All right, so right flap here, I did my linkage up and put it into this side of the golden clevis. Use CA to hold those guys together, and then that gives us the opportunity to adjust that linkage in and out of the servo side. This isn't connected right now. It's just sitting in the hole for the flap, but I'm just doing that to get all the geometry set up, and looks good. All right guys, so flap servos are all set up here. I'll show you the outside portion first and I'll show you the inside. So these amounts on the flaps are just random, made up, so I don't know what they're going to be yet. So that's the outside. And then we'll just open up this other side so you guys can see the final linkage setup. So what I do here is I don't like using the lock nuts. So we've got our clevis, keepers on each clevis facing out so they're serviceable, removable. We've got our rod here on the inside, C8 on both sides. So zero play, all the slops taken up. And of course our silver arm here is Loctited in place, and there's a large flat spot on that arm as well. So flap setup is awesome. That is wonderful. I'm not going to worry about the amount of flaps at this point because we will get that adjusted once the wings are installed and we're setting up our surfaces. The position right now really doesn't matter. When we fire up the plane for the first time with the wings on, we'll just have our flaps at half flaps as an example. All right guys, and that wraps up video 5 in the F15 XXL series, and of course wraps up our wings on this aircraft. Fortunately, with the design of this aircraft, the wings are quite simple, which is nice. Makes for an easy wing construction assembly process. So next video, we're going to jump into the organizing of the board and getting all of the mid stuff completed, which is going to involve like setting up our air system. A lot of that stuff is going to be the organization of all the electronics and everything. So lots to do in this next video. So stay tuned for that. Want to encourage you guys to check out the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. The After Dark is our live channel. We do live streams here from the shop, usually every 2 weeks. As we come into spring and summer and everything, the schedule gets a little hectic, but it's always fun. I enjoy the live streams, usually Saturday evenings, about 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Cool thing about it is you get to interact with us, ask us questions, and we answer them live if you're watching it live. So thanks guys so much for supporting the channel. Thank you channel members for doing what you do. If you're curious what channel membership is, there is some links down below. Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.